All right, so Chris, you went 500 days without caffeine. Like your nose fell off, like all kinds of crazy stuff happened. Walk me through this. What happened? What prompted you to do that? And what did the experience feel like from day one all the way through day 500?
Yeah, so I did 1,000 days sober first as a club promoter and really enjoyed the fact that I got hold of I got like sovereignty over my body again because I was using alcohol when I would go out to be more confident, to be lucid. And I thought, well, there's one thing that's left, which is kind of staring me in the face, and it's caffeine. So I made this decision, let's see if I can do 500 days without taking any. And when I first stopped, it was just before Christmas time. I know that people have said horror stories, the headaches, the sleepless nights, the sweats. I had none of that. I had absolutely nothing. So I just went cold turkey. I didn't taper down. I didn't need to supplement one coffee with a decaf or any of this stuff. I just stopped straight up. And for me, it was fine. Coming off was great. I definitely noticed that there is a crutch. You use caffeine as a crutch for your energy. You don't say, I'm low energy. You say, I need a coffee. And that papers over the cracks of, well, hang on, why am I tired at 11 o'clock in the morning? Like I shouldn't be tired at 11 in the morning. Maybe my sleep isn't right. Maybe I'm eating too close to bed. Maybe any one of a million other things that caffeine no longer can come in and fill all of these holes in. So I stopped. After around about a month or so, just getting into the new year, I noticed that my energy levels became much more flat. So I didn't have these peaks and troughs, which were just basically how much caffeine is in my blood. Like if I have caffeine, I'm awake. If I don't, I am tired. All of that got flattened out. I think people often say the same sort of thing when they start to do intermittent fasting or when they start to dial carbs out of their diet a little bit more. Energy levels were a little bit more flat. And then sleep quality really improved because I was no longer at the mercy of pushing my caffeine a little bit too much. Oh, I've had one extra coffee or Nocco or whatever drink at 2 p.m, which is then pushed over into my sleep. But the main thing that I took away from it over that 500 days was the ability to genuinely have control over my energy, to no longer need to rely on caffeine to just buttress all of this sort of fatigue, focus, everything. And now my rule after 500 days without it is never do it 2 days in a row. So if I have it on one day, so I've got 25 milligrams there in a drink that we're both having, I won't have it tomorrow. And that has kept my sensitivity level super, super dialed in, which means that even 25 milligrams for me is just enough.
I also put a link down below for Thrive Market, which is an online grocery store that you can sort by diet type. And I think it's really cool because you can sort by low carb or sort by keto. And it basically like opens up a grocery store just for keto or vegan or whatever you want to do. You just check that filter, makes it really cool. And that's a 30% off discount link. So the link down below in the description, 30% off your entire grocery order when you use that link. Plus you get a $50 free gift as well when you use that link because you're going through my channel. So that link, because they are a sponsor, you get 30% off your entire first order. So definitely check them out. They don't have a Mediterranean section specifically, but we're working on it. I'm working with their executive team on creating that because there's a lot of demand for it. People ask all the time. So again, that link down below this video, first line of the description.
What did it feel like the first time that you reintroduced it?
Yeah, it took my face off. It absolutely took me because I didn't just take 25 milligrams. I think I probably had like a medium-sized coffee. Very nice, actually. Very kind of euphoric. You know, anybody that's had a good coffee when the sun's shining on a morning, listening to your favorite music in the car, knows like it's fucking good. It's about as good as you're going to feel legally, I think. So that was impressive. However, my sensitivity had been reset so much that I really needed to understand. I needed to completely reconfigure what a dose of caffeine was for me. And I still have now. And I think I broke that maybe a few hundred days ago, maybe 200 days ago, perhaps. I reintroduced caffeine. My sensitivity is still super high.
I've heard people even say that when they go long periods of time without caffeine and reintroduce it, it even has almost a mild, almost psychedelic effect. And I've heard people talk about that. Did you kind of feel that way? I mean, was it so euphoric that it was almost borderline psychedelic?
It definitely is very embodied. Yeah. So it sort of lifts you out a little bit and you go, oh my God. Had I have pushed it too much, it would have definitely been anxiety inducing. For me, I remember it was a black coffee from Starbucks, just a straight up medium black coffee. I don't know what's in that. Maybe 120 milligrams of caffeine, something like that, probably. Not an insane amount. And yeah, I was floating around for the next few hours, but slept fine again that night. And now, like I say, between 50 and 100 for me is absolutely bang on. Any more than that, and I've totally lost my head.
Did you find that you had more control over different aspects of your life? Did that translate? So being able to control how you would feel energy-wise with caffeine and being able to modulate that and throttle that up and down, did that translate into other aspects of your life? Like in that same sort of balancing energy equation within your body, could you say, hey, I can exercise more restraint in XYZ category, like completely different silos?
Yes. So this is a really good point. And it's something that I learned first from doing the 1,000 Days Without Alcohol. What I learned was that anything that you're using to buttress your performance that you rely on, and this could be alcohol for confidence to speak to girls, to be sociable, could be caffeine to wake yourself up, it could be nicotine to relax, it could be weed to sleep, it could be whatever, right? There is a part of your body that knows, part of your mind that realizes I'm giving away my sovereignty to this thing, this compound, right? Like I am not enough in and of myself. I require support. I require something to come in and help me. And what I really, really loved was this sense of agency, of like power that it gave me, which sounds stupid. Like, oh my God, I was so powerful because I stopped doing caffeine. But it was more than what it did to my body. It was what it meant, like symbolically, what having to have something in order to be able to be me, to show up as me, to do my work. That's one of my favorite longer term lessons, is I want to be able to perform without any assistance. Drop me in the middle of a desert and I can still do it.
Dude, I'm the same way. I mean, at a very primal level, whether we are aware of it or not, I sincerely believe that subconsciously, anything that comes into our life that takes an element of control away from us is hindering us, especially as a male. And that might sound, terrible to say that, but I feel like we as men really feel like, oh, we want to control. And whether that's right, wrong, ugly, good, bad, whatever, you can't take away that that's how a lot of us feel. And when certain things come into that, take a look at like men, for example, that are afraid of commitment, right? They don't want to get into a relationship. You really dive into like, why don't you want to get into a relationship? What's going on here? Well, it's like, I'm afraid of commitment. I don't want to be locked down. You don't want to be locked down. So do you think that at a very micro level, like people are feeling locked down, even though they know they're getting something, they have something to gain, but subconsciously, I mean, they're getting locked down, and that is like carving away at their masculinity, and it's carving away. And I can only speak from the masculinity side because I'm a guy. So I have no idea. Like, I mean, I could ask my wife and she'd probably say the same thing, honestly. But is that sort of what I'm describing? Does that feel accurate? I mean, does it feel like an element of control is taken away from you?
I would say so, yes. You just don't want to have to rely on anything or anybody else. You want to be able to pick the battles that you want to fight, right? But you don't want to feel like you're so fragile and weak that you need to rely on. Everybody talks about, as you get older, you may need to go on a statin or take a baby aspirin or do a whatever. There will be medications that almost everybody that's listening toward the end of their life are going to have to start taking. Why? Well, it's because your physiology, your body as it is insufficient to be able to operate the way it should do. You've basically front-loaded reliance on other compounds earlier on. Now, again, this isn't to say there's some, body's naturalistic fallacy that taking creatine somehow means that you're reliant on creatine and you are not enough. I know that you can get not just from sickness to wellness, but from wellness to fitness with this sort of thing. But and this is a Hormozyism that I'll steal from him, where he says, if you can't perform without it, it's stopped conferring a benefit. There you go. Like, if you need it to perform, it stopped conferring a benefit to you. It's like air. You simply take it to get yourself from sickness into wellness, not from wellness into fitness. It's not a performance enhancer. It's a requirement. It's almost like a medicine for you.
Interesting. I mean, it's almost like, I'm not going to go for a run because I don't have my headphones.
Correct.
Yeah.
What's your use of caffeine?
So, I mean, I'm pretty minimal. So I'm like you. I almost always alternate. I don't have a strict guideline with it. So I don't say, okay, I went one day, but I generally consume less than 75 milligrams per day anyway, if I am going to. So it's pretty low. Mm-hmm. I don't drink coffee, almost exclusively green tea. And my philosophy on that, and right, wrong, ugly, good, bad, is that anytime you are borrowing a little bit from tomorrow for today, something is happening. And I look at it metabolically because that's just the echo chamber that I live in. So I try to look at this thing and I'm like, okay, if I'm accelerating everything and I'm borrowing from tomorrow for today, am I accelerating the negative attributes of metabolism too? And what I mean by that is simple glucose oxidation, simple fatty acid oxidation, all these things have exhaust, right? They all have byproduct. If we're accelerating that, if we're accelerating lipolysis above our natural level, are we going to have higher degrees of reactive oxygen species? Are we going to have higher degrees of just other markers of stress that we maybe don't always manage, whether it's during the half-life of the drug or after the half-life of the drug? So for me, I look at it like that and I'm saying, okay, at least if I'm taking it in a green tea form, at least I have some of the antioxidant buffering that's occurring there, right? And some of the catechins that are buffering. And one could argue, oh, well, coffee has the antioxidants too, right? I remember a statistic, it's like 85% of Americans or something get the majority of their daily antioxidants from their friggin' cup of coffee. That's how like piss poor the antioxidant profile is of most Americans, right? They're getting more from their coffee, but it also speaks volumes to how much antioxidant levels are in coffee, right? But when we look at it from the method of green tea, at least catechins with the green tea kind of help modulate metabolic effects too. So that's my kind of fucking justification of it in some ways, but it's a minimal amount too.
What about insulin sensitivity?
That's an interesting thing. So I think personally the jury is still out on that. When it comes down to insulin sensitivity with caffeine, again, you are borrowing from tomorrow for today. So the liberation of glycogen, that's going to circulate. You're going to have glycogen resynthesis. And when that happens, you're going to demand some level of insulin. You're going to demand some level of reuptake, which is going to place some demand on your pancreas. It simply has to. I don't see a way around it. Now, I'm not an expert in that field, so I have to, I don't want to speak out of turn with that. But, the whole caffeine causing insulin resistance, caffeine specifically, I think it could possibly. However, when you start looking at it in the sense of the polyphenols and the antioxidants, that seems to be the buffering of that. Because if you look directly at the data with chlorogenic acid and you look at some of these other polyphenol compounds that are in coffee, those have positive effects on insulin resistance. So it's like, are we at a net neutral? I think there's a line. I certainly think there's a line. And I think you've nailed it by doing the one on, one off. And I'm going to probably adopt something like that because that actually makes sense because you're giving yourself an opportunity to get the benefits of caffeine because we certainly know there are some, like we get lipolytic effects, we get cyclic adenosine monophosphate activation, we get all these awesome things that help our metabolism, but at what cost? So do we just find that delicate balance? What the fuck is balance? I don't know.
I think it works for me. And the other thing as well, and someone brought this up on a Q&A that I did, and it's so smart that it actually feels good. Being on caffeine just feels nice. And this particular commenter had said that he uses it, he suffers sometimes with depression and he uses it as a mood elevator. I thought, fuck yeah, like that's really interesting to think about. Forget the health effects, forget the fact that it's buttressing the energy and blah, blah, the sovereignty and the agency and all that shit. It just makes you feel good. And if you're having a bit of a bad day, a really crap morning, and you've got a ton of work you really don't want to do, forget this. We haven't even talked about training. I mean, if you were to create a drug that was probably the highest impact compound that you could take in terms of improving performance acutely, maybe caffeine, like good for lactate threshold, good for output in terms of power, good for output in terms of cardiovascular endurance, like really great. I think one on, one off, good way to do it. The reason I like it, James Clear says, one broken habit is a mistake. 2 broken habits is the start of a new habit. So it keeps my sensitivity nice and it stops me from tumbling down the I'm going to start taking caffeine all the time again rabbit hole.
What is your take on the whole caffeine nap hack? It's been around for a long time. I do a lot of work with special operations, FBI, and with various like Department of Defense. And that's been around for a long time. Like the whole have some caffeine before you take a little nap, or have some caffeine even before bed. And as long as you fall asleep before the caffeine hits you, basically it's stopping the adenosine receptor from kind of doing that typical thing. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it. So I used to have a business partner that I worked with who did the same thing, but with cocaine. So he next to his alarm clock on a morning would have a little black placemat about that big. And before he went to bed in the nighttime, he'd rack up a line and it would be next to the alarm. The alarm would go off. He'd roll over, sniff the line of cocaine, fall back asleep, and then allow the cocaine to wake him up. Again, wouldn't necessarily advise it as an optimal health strategy, but I've never used it. Naps for me don't agree with me
Same here.
at all. I wake up, my emotional state is absolutely wrecked. I feel foggy, brain fog. It doesn't work for me. I'm much better off just pushing through. From this studio, I'm going to the airport to fly to Manchester in the UK tomorrow. Overnight red-eye flight, and I've got 2 podcasts and a live show for Gymshark in Manchester tomorrow. I'm only going to have sleep on a plane. The best thing that I could do tomorrow, knowing me, isn't to try and have a nap at some point during the day. It's to push through until the night and just get 10 hours of sleep tomorrow night ahead of the weekend's events. Naps for me don't work.
I'm the same way. I mean, and I think part of that is just being self-aware and understanding how your brain operates. I think there is a kind of a strange dichotomy. You know, you've got people that are very, very good at being able to operate out of that sort of fight or flight. Like they thrive on it. And, you know, there's people that want to be like that, but they're just not. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I really do think it's our past experiences and things like that dictate like how we thrive in that. Are you someone that, like, it's the same, and it is purely anecdotal, but based on hundreds of people that I've talked to with this, the same kind of people that thrive with fasting and things like that, they're into that too. It's almost this weird, they just like that feeling of like, I need that extra adrenaline. I need those extra catecholamines to get me through that. Yep. I've also found that very compassionate, empathetic people end up having those same issues with naps. It's like, it's the kind of people that when they do go into those theta waves for just like a moment, it completely wrecks them.
Well, that's both. You've described me in 2 different types of people there. So that's both of me together, very empathetic, but also I like the hard charging sort of adrenaline driven stuff too. It's not for me. And also I would say when Matthew Walker did a fucking amazing service for the world when he did that Joe Rogan podcast, number 1109, which is how often I've gone back and listened to it. And, you know, he changed as a club promoter that was going to bed at 4:00 in the morning, 2 or 3 nights a week. He completely changed my view on how sleep works. And I think there's, you know, regardless of whether people have got criticisms about the way that book was put together and stuff, I think that he did a great service of just saying, think about your sleep, really think about it, because it's important. But you can take that too far, and I do too. I become so overly neurotic about sleep quality, assisted by wearing a tracker, obviously. I did a trip to Qatar the other week, which was a 16-hour flight direct from LA to Qatar, which goes through 8 time zones as well. So basically lost 26 hours of a day when I flew there, and then got up and needed to do debate 48 hours later. And I was like, right, okay, this is going to hurt. It's going to suck. I'll tactically use caffeine. I'll tactically try and get as much sleep as I can, but I'll accept the fact that it's not going to happen. And that lit me up. I was like, oh, this is almost like, I don't know, like not like the world's against me, but it made me feel like I had something to battle against. And that was exciting to me.
Dude, I mean, I had an interesting conversation with, you know who David Weck is?
I've heard the name.
David Weck, he's the guy that invented the Bosu ball.
Ah, okay.
He's a total lunatic, and he's going to appreciate that I said that, David, if you're watching. Like, he is that way. Like, he's a genius, but he's nuts. And in an awesome way. And he and I were talking. We were at Greg Glassman's house at the CrossFit thing. We were like, just there was an event that was going on, and we were talking. And he talks about how with THC basically made it so he like couldn't sleep, and he could through this period. I was like, you know what? It's crazy, man. I went through this crazy episode myself of like severe insomnia for like 3 months, where it was just like really, really bad. I don't know what was going on. Whatever. I've since recovered from it. But during that point in time, it was borderline psychedelic. Like, and I was describing to him, I was like, do you think that there is some survival mechanism that actually kicks in that triggers an adaptation when you're severely sleep deprived that would be completely unconventional and irresponsible to talk about to the masses, right? You don't say, hey, purposely deprive yourself of sleep for 4 days because you're going to get this crazy adaptation benefit, right? Like, I would never tell people to do that. But it makes me wonder if, wait a minute, like, these extreme bouts of stress, as metabolically detrimental as they are to the brain, is there some crazy adaptation that's occurring?
I asked David Sinclair this very question. I said,
really?
Yep, this precise question. I said, and he said he'd never been asked it before. Why is it that, as the guy that sings the praises of the hormesis, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, you want to get cold, you want to get hot, you want to be hungry, you want to be et cetera, you want to work hard and high heart rate. Like, why is sleep deprivation not also a hormesis stressor? Like, why? Why is it not performing the same function? And he had an answer, which I think is what you're talking about, which is that you basically net out at a loss because of what it does to the brain health. And he basically parked that in a different category. But if you think adaptively, which is what we're playing off the back of with pretty much everything here, you know, a state change, why would it be that our ancestors would have gone for 2 or 3 days without sleep? Well, maybe because you're being hunted by something or someone, maybe because you're away from the camp and you need to be completely dialed in to be able to see where you need to go. I don't know. Maybe there is a line after which you cross. I mean, we're totally in bro science territory here, but I totally could see that could be a thing.
Yeah. I mean, the bro science territory is kind of interesting because that's where you start carving interest in research, right? So, I mean, it's okay to talk about as long as you're not taking away as fact. But I mean, I'm V-Shred after all. So I mean,
you are V-Shred.
So I might, you know,
Mr. Bro Science.
But with that, you know, I also think, okay, well, maybe you're in pursuit of a bison or something, or, you know, you're in pursuit of something for hunting. And if you were to go to sleep, you'd lose that. And your life literally depended on staying in pursuit of that and stalking, right?
Precisely.
So there has to be an element that occurs there. And maybe we're just not studying it properly. Maybe that's because we're so far into looking at like, okay, how is sleep restorative? How do we do this? How do we, I think if we almost created research that disarmed that a tiny bit, sleep anxiety would go down. Because
Yeah, sure.
I'm someone that suffers with sleep anxiety. If I don't, oh my gosh, all this stuff, right? Like if I don't match that, then what's going to happen? You know, when in reality, it's like, shit, if I actually just relaxed and realized that if, hey, a couple bad nights of sleep actually might do me good in a different category, it's all good. So, okay, with that, if someone is wanting to quit caffeine, what would you say is a takeaway? Would you say just go cold turkey, just do it?
I think for most people, that's a very ballsy move. And based on the friends that downstream from me doing it, tried to do it, less than 20% were able to do it the way that I did, which was just cut it out completely. The best protocol that I've seen, presuming that you are taking around about 3 caffeinated drinks per day, let's say that 2 of them are coffee and 1 of them is some sort of energy drink or other thing. First off, this shouldn't be news to anybody on your channel. Your adenosine system isn't active for the first 90 minutes of the day. Your adrenal system is. So replace your morning coffee with salt, like Element or Himalayan pink salt or whatever in water. You know, you're going to optimize your adrenals, brain health, fatigue, like the way that your appetite is. Well, everything is going to be better if you do that. Replace that morning coffee. Switch out 1 coffee a week for the first week to 2 weeks with decaf. Switch out 1 coffee a week for the next 2 weeks with another decaf, and then get rid of the energy drink at the end. And then after 6 weeks, you're going to be completely cold turkey, and you're going to dial it down bit by bit by bit. There's a bunch of different, very good quality decaf coffees. So if for a lot of people, it's the ritual of making the coffee, it's the sensation, it's the taste, it's the bowel movement assistance in the morning. If that's you, you know, Black Rifle Coffee Company does a really great decaf. You can have ones that have been like, you know, you can still go through the process if you're into your roasting, if you're into making it nice, you can do all of that. But decaf is a ready-made solution to just slowly titrate that dose down and then see how you feel. And I think within the space of a month afterward, you will be pretty well balanced in terms of energy. And I would be very surprised if you don't see it as a really important change that you can make.
And you've got control back of your life.
Yes, sir.
Cool. As always, keep it locked here. See you tomorrow.